Hello, everybody. Back. Week 8 reaction podcast to week 8 of college football that wasn't quite as wild and wacky as week 7, but still produced some nice outcomes and some games that we got to talk about. So that's what I'm here to do. I've actually really kind of been enjoying these podcasts where I can kind of just give my thoughts on things and kind of just run the show myself. I love the podcast with the other guys, but I do kind of like this podcast. Not kind of, I do like this podcast where I can just give it to you all in 30 minutes, pause, and then go from there. So let's go ahead and jump in here. Let's see if I can hit a transition. I did. So let's go ahead and jump away. I'm not going to talk about Ohio State and Indiana. They just continue to roll on. They are the number 1 and 2 team in the country because of what happened Friday night. And that was the number 2 team in the country, Miami, going down to Louisville. And Jeff Brom, when he was at Purdue, now when he's at Louisville, gets a top 5 team all the time, every year at some point in October. It's what Jeff Brom does on a yearly basis. It's amazing. You never know when it's going to come. You think it's going to come one week. Nope, doesn't come one week. Louisville gets blown out, or Purdue at the time gets blown out. Then next week, you're like, they got no shot. And then that's when it happens. Well, it happened on Friday night, 24-21. The Louisville Cardinal went into Miami. Normally, it's a home game. At least when Jeff Brom was at Purdue, it was a home game. So this was on the road. Miller Moss was 23 of 37 for 248 and 2 touchdowns. Louisville outrushed Miami 119-63. That'll do it. Louisville held the ball for longer. They had less turnovers. I'm going to get to that. They outgained Miami. But here was the big problem. Number 1, Miami running backs only ran the ball. Mark Fletcher, their leading running back, 8 times for 18 yards. Cannot happen. Cannot happen. Miami, what are we doing? We were a little better than that before this week. Here's the big problem. Carson Beck strikes again. Carson Beck's biggest problem at Georgia was turnovers. In that 1 year, last year, he dealt with a lot of drops and a lot of turnovers, interceptions, ill-advised throwing into double, sometimes triple coverage. And what happened on Friday night? Exactly that. His last interception was an out route behind the receiver. Can't have that happen. It's the only place you can't throw that ball. He threw into double coverage. I didn't watch all of the game. I did watch most of the fourth quarter and bits and pieces of the first half because it was on Friday, and I like to give my wife a reprieve from all college football on all days now that you can pretty much do that. So we kind of watch things, and then I turned this game on when she went to bed. I saw 1 interception being thrown into double coverage and 1 interception thrown into triple coverage. Carson Beck strikes again. With the Miami loss, they now have 1 ACC loss. Louisville has 1 ACC loss, so Louisville's a sneaky good team. And the only teams at the top of the ACC conference are, get this, Georgia Tech, Virginia, and SMU. Then all the teams with 1 loss are the Pitt Panthers, the Blue Devils, the Cardinals, the Cal Golden Bears, and then Miami. That's crazy. Everything is still in front of Miami and Louisville for that. They play SMU. They play Pitt. So they have an opportunity to still reach the ACC title game. However, will they need some help now because they don't play Virginia and they don't play Georgia Tech? So they might actually need some help to get there. And when I said SMU, I said it shockingly because they were losing to Clemson yesterday. When I looked at the ticker last, they actually beat Clemson 35-24. Wow, this is a sidetrack. I wasn't even going to cover this game. I picked Clemson to win. It looks like SMU had 12 fourth quarter points. Wow. So it looks like Cade Klubnik. Did he start? No, it was Christopher Vizena, the freshman or the backup. He was 29 of 42, 317, 3 touchdowns, QBR just under 50. Kevin Jennings, though, was 23 of 43, 290, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, QBR just shy of 70. Clemson only ran the ball for 35 yards. That's Clemson's biggest problem. When Clemson was dominant, their offensive line and running backs would produce a semblance of a running game. Now, they had to always in the Deshaun Watson era and the Trevor Lawrence era, they always had to supplement with the QB run game. Always. I wasn't even going to talk about this, but let me talk about this now. Clemson, in their era, like I said, they always had to supplement with the QB run game. However, their running backs and offensive line were able to produce a rushing attack, a effective rushing attack. That has not been happening these last 4 years, however long it's been since kind of this little, I put in quotes, Clemson downslide. I think eventually it will lead to a mutually agreeing to part ways or maybe even an outright firing for Dabo. The problem is his buyout's really high. I don't know if they did something sneaky with like they did with James Franklin, like Penn State did with James Franklin. But rushing for 35 yards against SMU's defensive front is not that great. And you can at me, but I've watched like 3 SMU games this year, and the rushing attack for the teams playing SMU looked a lot better than 35 yards on 30 attempts. And this isn't even one thing where the quarterback was sacked a bunch. At least let me look. I don't think so, though. Why don't they show defensive stats? But that's great. If you're Clemson, like, find a running game. Bow up a little bit. All right, well, I wasn't planning on talking about that. But in looking at the ACC, Miami now has a little bit of a climb to get to the top. So something to keep an eye on. Louisville's right there, though. ACC is wide open. And the problem is, I think the ACC teams in this day and age in college football can play with anyone. And we'll get to my top 5 in a little bit. But let's move on and let's talk about Saturday. I am not going to, like I said, I'm not talking about Ohio State, Indiana. They rolled 34-0. Ohio State over Wisconsin, 38-13 Indiana over Michigan State. That was just blowout, nothing to talk about. They keep on keeping on. Julian saying Fernando Mendoza shooting to the top of Heisman. They're just in charge at all time. Texas A&M goes to Fayetteville and comes away with a 3-point victory. Texas A&M and Arkansas always play these close games. Normally, this is actually played at Jerry World. The last couple of years, this was played at Jerry World, so this is kind of the first time in recent memory, anyway, that it was played at one of the college actually home fields. So 42-45. There were over 1,000 yards of total offense in this game. Very even all the way around. No turnovers. Arkansas had a little more rushing yards. A&M had a little more passing yards. This was just basically whoever had the ball last was going to win the game. Whoever had the ball last was going to win the game. And A&M got a stop and got the ball last. So it looks like, I watched kind of bits and pieces of this, but Arkansas kind of went on a 12-play, 93-yard drive to make it a 3-point game and then did an onside kick. And it was ruled offside. A&M recovered, and that was the end of the game. So very kind of thrilling. It was a 10-point lead, again, with roughly 4 minutes to go, and then Arkansas got a last kind of ditch. So A&M is now at the top of the SEC standings along with Alabama and Georgia. Ole Miss, Georgia and Ole Miss, let's just roll right into that. That was a entertaining, no defense sort of game until the second half. Ole Miss scored on their first 5 possessions. They went 5 for 5 and scored on all of them. And then they had a 9-point lead. It was 24-35 late third quarter. And then Georgia got 2 stops in the second half. Ole Miss had 14 total yards in the first quarter after going up and down the field all game. Trinidad Chambliss was really good again. He had 263 yards, touchdown, QBR 84. He also added 42 rushing yards. But here's the thing, running backs contributed 45 yards of rushing offense. That just absolutely cannot happen. Gunnar Stockton is a dog, no pun intended. He was so efficient. He was 26 of 31 for 289, 4 touchdowns, QBR just shy of 97. Again, that's on a scale of 0 to 100. They ran the ball, Georgia did, for 221. Ole Miss could not stop the common cold, a little tickle in the throat yesterday afternoon. When it came to crunch time and Ole Miss needing a stop, Georgia just pushed the pile and got first downs. Georgia scored 17 points in the fourth quarter. Georgia is in control. And I think both of these teams can win the national title still. But Georgia is now back in my national title because Georgia is the only team I've seen that can play whatever game you need them. I've seen them play low-scoring games versus Auburn. I've seen them play now 2 shootouts versus Tennessee and Ole Miss, and I've seen them go on the road, Auburn, at Tennessee, and get wins. Now I've seen them at home get wins. So Georgia is now in one of my 5, in one of my 5 teams that can win a national title game. And I think Ole Miss is right there still too. Now my top 5 is going to look a little wildly different, and yeah, it is SEC top heavy. Because those are the teams that I have seen win close games and win shootouts and go on the road and win and then win at home. I haven't seen Big Ten teams outside of Indiana and Ohio State do that. I haven't seen SEC teams do that. Maybe Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, though, I still think is too reliant on quarterback run game, and I do think that doesn't get them a natty. Do I think that gets them a playoff win or maybe even 2? Absolutely. But I don't think that gets them the national championship. And that's what this list is. By the way, Georgia Tech 7-0 for the first time since 1966. 1966. Incredible. Another thing. Another kind of since a long time ago stat. 1950, Vandy, 6-1 since 1950. Best start in like 70 years. I heard one of the broadcasters say yesterday, they are the most efficient offense in all of college football, and they looked at yesterday against LSU. LSU's defense is really good. Now, it was without Whit Weeks, but they just put down and put to sleep LSU from their title hopes. And they're still hanging around with one SEC loss. Diego Pavia, he might be in his 12th year of college football. I think he's in his like 7th or 8th. He's petitioning for another one. But he was really good. His QBR was 93. He only threw for $161, but it's what he did with his legs. 17 carries for 86 yards. And you might be saying, Micaiah, how is that any different than the other teams? Their quarterback were leading rushers. And you criticize their running game. Yeah, because their running backs didn't do anything, like Ole Miss. Vanderbilt ran for 239 yesterday as a team. They had a running back with 82 yards. They had their starting running back with 45 yards, 14 carries. Another one with 22. Like, they got contributions from other people, not just Diego Pavia. Meanwhile, LSU, Garrett Nussmeier, he was okay yesterday. The report is that he's been struggling with an abdomen injury, so he hasn't kind of had the strength on his throws, and he's been a little bit off, and I could definitely see that. But also, this running game is not helping them or helping him, and they're just not sticking to it. They're pass heavy. They ran the ball 21 times to throw it for 28 times, but they averaged 4.8 yards per carry. Why wouldn't you do that more? Why wouldn't you do that more? Now, they did get down. It was 17-13 at halftime, so you're right there. And then Vanderbilt rips off 14 third quarter points. And then LSU never kind of really got back in after that. But Vanderbilt, Diego Pavia said we could win the SEC. I laughed at it. I'm the first one to tell you right now, I laughed at Vanderbilt, but they are right there. They're a playoff team. Right now, they're a playoff, and they can win a playoff game. Incredible. Man, if you would have told me that Vanderbilt and Indiana 2 years ago, if you would have told me that Vanderbilt and Indiana would be the number 2 ranked team in the nation at some point in time, and Vanderbilt would just be a high-level SEC team, I would laugh in your face. In the last 2 years, beat Alabama and LSU, I'd laugh in your face. I'd make fun of you. You'd walk away. I text my buddy, guess what this guy just told me? Absolutely. I'd laugh in your face. Incredible. I do love this sport that we call college football. Texas Tech went on the road to Arizona State and lost. So I was getting some comments, hey, why didn't you put Texas Tech in your top 5? Well, this is kind of why. I wanted to see it. I thought that they were the class of the Big 12, and they still might be. But they went. You can't go on the road and kind of lay an egg. Now, here's the thing. They had to start their freshman quarterback, Will Hammond, because their normal starting quarterback, Morton, couldn't go. Got hurt in the Utah game, and then I don't think has ever really been right since then. Maybe re-aggravated. But here's another team. They ran for 109, but their leading rusher, again, was their quarterback. And they really didn't get contributions from other running backs. You just cannot have that. Sam Leavitt was really good for Arizona State. 313 through the air, 1 touchdown, QBR just shy of 71. Now, Arizona State didn't run. They ran the ball 36 times for 75 yards, 2.1 yards a carry. So that Texas Tech defense, sorry, Texas Tech fans, actually did their job, but they didn't get anything going on offense until fourth quarter. Texas Tech scored 15 fourth quarter points, only 7 before that. But then kind of Arizona State also scored 10 fourth quarter points to kind of put that game away. Arizona State scored in every single quarter, at least a field goal in every single quarter. So they kind of just managed the game and won the game the old school way. I do want to see here. Where are the team stats? Do they have it here? They're the Big 12 standings. BYU's at the top. They got a big win last night in the Holy War. I picked that, by the way. And Cincinnati at 4-0, 6-1 in conference. Also at the top. Then it's Arizona State and Texas Tech. So Texas Tech does play BYU. That's going to be a heck of a game, but not Cincinnati. So that BYU Texas Tech game might be for a spot in the championship game, but they're going to need some help because, again, now they don't hold the tiebreaker to Arizona State, who only has 1 conference loss. And Arizona State plays Houston, Iowa State, West Virginia, Colorado, and Arizona. The remaining 5 games, 3 of them are easy. Really, what I would say the tough games, quote unquote, are their next 2 weeks, Houston and at Iowa State. Arizona's a good team, can put up points, but I would pick Arizona State over Arizona. Colorado's a mess, and West Virginia's a mess. So really, Arizona State's got it all set up in front of them. Let me look at Cincinnati just quickly. Cincinnati has to play Utah yet and BYU, so that will figure itself out as well. Man, BYU's kind of got a tough schedule down the stretch here. Speaking of BYU, let's go ahead and talk about this Holy War. No one threatened to go full Utah, but maybe that's why the Utes lost. But BYU gets a home dub 24-21. This was a close game. Again, a game I really didn't, I kind of was just paying attention to stats and on the ticker. It was 10-7 at halftime. Both teams scored 14 fourth quarter points. And it was just a kind of a close game all throughout. Utah did outgain BYU 470 to 368. First downs were neck and neck. Third down efficiency was neck and neck. Fourth down efficiency was neck and neck. But here's the deal. One fumble lost, one interception thrown by the Utes, and that's all BYU needs. The Utes also had 12 penalties for 77 yards. You can't have that. You can't have that. And then BYU just kind of took it from there and kind of held time of possession 31-28 in their favor. I want to see. Normally it gives you who fumbled the football, but it does. It doesn't. Oh, it was Mana. It was one of the running backs. I thought that Devin Dampier may have had both turnovers, but no, he had the one. He was good though. He was their second leading rusher for Utah. Normally he is their leading rusher, but again, they got contribution from running back. So it does kind of look like Utah was able to move the ball, but those two turnovers, that will do it. So now Utah appears to be all but out of the Big 12 title race. They have 2 conference losses, and I feel like 2 conference losses kind of puts dirt on your casket there in the hole that you have dug for it. So the Big 12 is going to be wild with BYU and Cincinnati, Arizona State, Texas Tech, and Houston, mind you, because Houston's right there only with 1 conference loss and 1 loss overall. Man, I do love college football kind of in this time of year where you're just like, anything can happen. Conferences can go any way right now. So the holy war goes to the Mormons in the mountains, as I said on the podcast. The third Saturday in October, Red Hot Alabama. I heard, whether this is true or not, and whether I heard correctly or not, I heard a stat that Alabama becomes the first team in the AP era to beat 4 straight AP ranked teams. They got really hot, and they are hot at the right time. And if I'm like, can they sustain this long enough to roll into the playoffs? Because if that's true, they might be the favorite. I called for Alabama to win because I thought they had the better defense, and that's exactly what happened on Saturday night. This was really the game I like to watch. Kind of during the game when I'm watching a whole bunch of games, I kind of get brain fried. So I like to kind of just focus in on one game, especially at night, if I can, and then kind of just check in. Tennessee actually outgained Alabama. They were even kind of with turnovers, time of possession. Tennessee had 10 penalties, though. But Alabama used a 16-point second quarter to kind of just put the nail in said coffin, and then kind of scored in the third and fourth quarter to just keep things far enough out of reach. Every time Tennessee got it a little closer, Alabama just continued to pull away. Jose Aguilar, he'll do, but he was red hot in that Georgia game, and that's Joey Aguilar, not Jose Aguilar. I apologize. Joey Aguilar, the best version we've seen was him in that first half of that Georgia game where it was zip, 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 zip right down the field. That is not what you're getting on a weekly basis, and so I got to kind of put that in my brain. But the third Saturday in October goes to Bama. Let's see if I made any notes on this. I didn't make any notes, but they're going to they found a running game through committee. 32 carries, 109. This is Alabama for 120, They did run for about 4 yards a carry, but they're going to have to find a way to have a efficient running game through their running backs on the ground. Their leading rusher on Saturday was Jeremy Bernard, who's actually their leading wide receiver. Jam Miller toted the ball 12 times for 15 yards. It's not going to get done. So that's the one thing that does scare me about Alabama. But Ty Simpson was 19 to 29 for 253, 2 touchdowns, QBR 89. He was really, really good. I think Tennessee can make the playoff and can win a playoff game, but they now have 2 conference losses and they're 5-2. I think that they are really good, but now we're getting to that territory where Tennessee might be put to kind of sleep for the rest of the year. Notre Dame and USC went the way of the Fighting Irish at home. And I have a message for Lincoln Riley, and the message is such. Why'd you get cute? Just call the offense. You were in the game. You were winning the momentum game. It was 13-14 at halftime. Then you were down 2 in the third quarter, and then you get cute. You tried to do a reverse pass with Mekhi Lemon, who made a dumb decision to try to throw it. And then he fumbled the football when he really just should have. The defense won the possession. He should have just got down. And you didn't stick to what was getting it done, which was Jaden Maiava just picking apart the Irish secondary and picking on the corners and picking on the safeties. Jaden Maiava was 22 of 42 for 328, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And the 1 interception kind of came late in the game to kind of seal the 10-point win for Notre Dame. But his QBR was 87.5. CJ Carr, on the other hand, was not good in the second half. His QBR was 33. And if it wasn't for Jeremiah Love running for 228 yards, 9.5 yards a carry, and Jadarian Price running for 7 yards a carry, 87 yards on 13 carries, and a touchdown, Notre Dame would have been in trouble. But USC couldn't stop the outside zone to save their life. The amount of times that they blitzed 7 people, USC, and it was an outside zone, and just Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price went into the crowd and popped out, was amazing. Jadarian Price also had a kickoff return for a touchdown right when USC went up. I believe USC went up 24-21. Very next play, Jadarian Price popped it out. USC missed 2 tackles, and away Notre Dame win. If I'm being totally honest, I expected kind of Michigan to lean on USC last week, and that just didn't happen at all. USC had 29 carries, 68 yards, 2.3 yards a carry. Notre Dame's run defense shut it down. They made them very one-dimensional, and if you can make a Lincoln Riley offense one-dimensional, you're probably going to win the football game. Lincoln Riley needs that balance, but he got cute in the second half, and he should have just relied on Jaden Maiava. And he didn't. And it cost him. So Notre Dame gets a 10-point win, and their playoff hopes stay alive. I do believe that if they win out, Notre Dame will make the college football playoff, and Notre Dame can win with anyone. They had more total yards than USC, less turnovers. First downs were the same. Now, they did have 8 penalties for 96 yards, so they got to clean that up. They were 3-11 on third down. That's what I'm talking about, CJ Carr. But they held more time of possession, and they were better on fourth down. They were 1 for 2. USC was 0 for 2. So Notre Dame is a playoff caliber team, assuming they win out, and they can beat anyone because Miami was a last-second kick, and Texas A&M was a last-second play. So, and both of those teams at one point in time were on my top 5 national contender list. I do feel bad for Auburn. Man, Auburn in their house of horrors just can't get a home dub, man. They've lost, I think, 8 straight conference games. Like, I feel so bad for Auburn right now. They're 0-4 in conference. Hugh Freeze looks miserable. The team looks miserable. The refs just at all Auburn games just have not been good. So I got to finish this up here, but I want to finish up with the Michigan-Washington game here because I think I hit on everything I wanted to talk about. Yep. Just kind of doing a mental checklist. Texas got an overtime win against Kentucky. Arch Manning's still an issue there. It's going to be a wild kind of last 6 weeks of college football, and I'm here for it. Michigan, Washington. Wink Martindale, I need you to stop blitzing your linebacker. I would like one of the nerds, if I do have any of the nerds listening to this, to find a stat on Michigan's defensive efficiency when they blitz a linebacker versus when they don't blitz a linebacker. And I am going to bet that Michigan's defensive efficiency, because I'm sure there's a stat on this, is really high when they don't blitz a linebacker and really, really bad when they do blitz a linebacker. Yesterday, first half, Washington, all 5 of their first half drives went into Michigan territory. One ended with a touchdown, and then Washington kind of either self-destructed or turnovers in that first half, or not turnovers, but kind of self-destructed penalties and didn't hit passes they needed to hit. And then in the second half, Michigan got 2 turnovers kind of back-to-back. But Michigan got back to Michigan football, which is running game and efficient passing game. Bryce Underwood was 21 of 27 for 230 and 2 touchdowns. His QBR, they say, is 64. I thought that he played a much better game than that. So here's why stats kind of lie. But Jordan Marshall had to start in place of the injured Justice Haynes. 25 carries, $133 and a touchdown, 5.3 yards a carry. Bryce Underwood also added 25 yards on the ground. Michigan 4-team ran for 187. Damon Williams, he's going to be an exciting player the longer he stayed in. He did have 3 interceptions. The one was at the end of the game, kind of in garbage time, but the 2 backbreakers were one right after Washington forced Michigan to punt the ball after what I thought was a terrible spot, but anyway, I digress. Forced Michigan to punt the ball, and then he immediately throws a interception, and it's returned into Washington, deep into Washington territory. And the next one, right after that, Washington is driving, and again throws it right to kind of the linebacker. So it's a young quarterback. I'm still waiting for Bryce Underwood to make the freshman mistake, and that just hasn't happened. But I got to listen to Vegas more. They had Michigan at a 6.5 point favorite. They opened as a 6.5 point favorite against Washington. I said, what are you doing? Should have taken it. 24-7. They got back to Michigan football. So can they sustain it? I also did not realize, I knew Michigan was a younger team. I didn't realize they were the youngest team in the Big Ten. Their entire offensive line, except 2. So their entire right side of their offensive line are all redshirt freshmen. Their left tackle's a redshirt freshman. So their left guard and center are seniors, but everyone else are redshirt freshmen. They have a true freshman quarterback. They had Jordan Marshall, a redshirt freshman running back. They were down to their 3rd and 4th string tight ends, freshmen. There's one of their 2 starting wide receivers, freshmen. So they are very young, and this is why you get kind of, as Pat McAfee said, the up and down and up and down. So they're up now. They play Michigan State next week, rivalry game on the road. I expect them to kind of do this. Lose the game? I don't know. Probably not. Michigan State's not that good, but I expect them to listen to, do a lot of this. Once they get a lot of experience, though, watch out for the Wolverines. I don't think they are a playoff team. I don't, but it was good to see them stabilize the ship and bounce back. All right, everyone, that'll do it for me on this Sunday morning. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. Florida State has lost their 4th straight game too, so now it might be coming open. The Stanford job is open. Everyone's kind of forgot about that. By the way, something to keep an eye on. When teams in this, for conferences that have been realigned, so Big Ten and ACC especially, Me and Robert are noticing a trend that when East Coast teams go west, it's an L every single time, and most of the time they cover the West Coast team. When West goes east, the West Coast team also has the advantage as well. Like when East goes west, bet on the West Coast teams, and when West goes east, bet on the West Coast teams to cover, especially early in the day. Penn State got a just 1 point loss, which I actually won some money on yesterday because I thought that Penn State would kind of rally, and they did a little bit there. So we'll see what happens with the Penn State situation, but just keep an eye on, because Florida State went to Stanford, lost. Maryland went to UCLA, lost. So just keep an eye on that. All right, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my ramblings for 35 minutes. Till next time. Bye-bye.